Even by Astartes standards, the Space Wolves were unique. In combat, they displayed extraordinary ruthlessness and brutality. The 6th Legion would fight like a pack of wolves, ferociously and selflessly launching frenzied attacks on the enemy until their target was completely torn apart. They were like a pack of fierce yet loyal wolves fed by the Emperor. Regardless of the orders the Emperor gave, these warriors of Fenris would execute them without question. In fact, before their Primarch was found, the early Space Wolves, along with the Salamanders and the Alpha Legion, were collectively known as the Trefoil Legions. For certain purposes, the Emperor granted these 3 legions more specialized gene seed, endowing them with unique functions and traits. For instance, the Space Wolves were particularly adept at countering and destroying other Astartes forces. After their gene father, Leman Russ, was found, the tribal customs of his homeworld, the death world of Fenris, were brought into the legion. This made the Space Wolves even more isolated from other Imperial forces. To most outsiders, the warriors of the 6th Legion seemed like a group of uncivilized barbarians, crude and bizarre. If the ice and fire of Fenris forged the wolves' souls, then the gene seed of Leman Russ shaped their bodies. Under the Primarch's leadership, the wolves accepted their place within the Imperium without complaint. They executed any order given by the Emperor without hesitation or regret, even if it meant destroying their own brothers. The Emperor's Executioners, this was their 2nd title. Now, due to the machinations of Chaos and the traitor Horus, the 6th Legion had arrived in the skies above Prospero, the homeworld of the Thousand Suns Legion. The Wolf King, Leman Russ, issued an ultimatum to his brother Magnus, demanding that he disarm and evacuate the civilians. However, because of the trickery of the Chaos Gods, none of these messages reached Magnus's ears. Seeing no response from the Lord of Prospero, the Wolf King made up his mind. He would complete the mission handed down by the Emperor and the Warmaster. The wolf pack was poised to strike, growling with rage. A vicious battle between Space Marine legions was about to begin. On Prospero, the Thousand Suns Primarch, who had not received Leman Russ's message, could only silently await the arrival of the Emperor's punishment.
Magnus knew that he had not only violated the Edict of Nicaea, banning psychic powers, but also destroyed the Emperor's vital plan on Terra. Distraught, Magnus locked himself in his library, frantically searching for any way to atone for his mistakes. Just then, taking advantage of the Primarch's chaotic thoughts, the forces of chaos began whispering in his ear again. But Magnus maintained his last shred of loyalty. He had already ordered his legion's fleet stationed at Prospero to split into 4 battle groups and depart for different corners of the galaxy to avoid exchanging fire with the incoming Imperial forces. He even hoped that his sons would not resist whatever the Space Wolves were about to do, accepting any punishment the Emperor handed down. However, faced with the possibility of the entire legion being wiped out, the Thousand Suns, led by Chief Librarian Ozek Ahriman, rejected their Gene Father's request. Although without their Primarch's leadership and fleet support, the Legion warriors still decided to fight to the death against the wolves invading their home. Thus, in 734 M31, the Battle of Prospero began. With the fleet sent away by the Primarch, the Thousand Suns quickly lost orbital control. For the wolves, although they had orbital support, the target on the ground was still a powerful Space Marine legion. Primarch Leman Russ first ordered a saturation bombardment of the planet from low orbit. Instantly, dense artillery fire rained down from the sky, altering the landscape of the entire world. Mountains were leveled, oceans evaporated, and cities turned to rubble. In an instant, the air of Prospero was filled with rolling heat waves and particulate matter. The once beautiful planet had turned into scorched earth. However, one city survived, Tizca, the city of light and capital of Prospero. Most of the remaining Thousand Suns forces were stationed here. The Raptora cult combined their powers to raise a psychic void shield covering the entire city, successfully blocking the firepower pouring down from orbit. The Thousand Suns gathered all their remaining armed forces under the shield of Tizca, swearing to fight the wolves to the end. After the orbital bombardment, the Wolf King Leman Russ decided to personally lead the ground assault on Tizca to deliver punishment to the Thousand Suns in the city and his brother Magnus.
A powerful landing force composed of Space Wolves, Astartes, Mortal Auxiliaries, Custodian Guard, and Sisters of Silence launched an attack on Tizca. Landing craft were deployed around the city in numbers like sand in a gale. Primarch Leman Russ himself was the first to step onto the soil of Prospero. He led the wolf pack in sweeping through the defensive fortifications along the city's eastern coastline, opening up crucial landing zones for follow-up forces. Various heavy armored vehicles were also continuously airdropped into the battlefield. True to the wolves' ferocious style, this armored firepower was used to sweep through all the city's building complexes. They methodically followed behind the infantry, blasting every house and fortification in sight into rubble.
In such a dangerous mission against another Astartes legion, civilian casualties were no longer a concern for the Wolfpack. Missiles, meltas, and plasma turned the entire city of Tizca into a sea of fire. The wolves let out thunderous war cries, their weapons spitting tongues of fire and deadly bolter rounds. Combined with chainswords and power axes, the Wolfpack tore apart every enemy blocking their path. Meanwhile, behind the acrid smoke, the Thousand Sons were putting up stiff and determined resistance. Aside from the remaining 15th Legion Astartes, a force of red-clad mortal auxiliaries, the elite Spireguard of Prospero, proved to be formidable opponents. This well-trained and disciplined mortal force, relying on their steely will, did not flee in cowardice when facing the terrifying space wolves. They took up arms, established defenses, and heroically faced the wrath of an Astartes legion. Relying on firepower and tenacious fighting spirit, this mortal force fulfilled their oath as defenders of Prospero. They even managed to pin the ferocious Wolfpack down on their positions for a time. Behind the Spireguard stood the Thousand Sons, constantly unleashing their psychic powers. Chief Librarian Ahriman led the warriors of the Corvade cult to engage the Space Wolves first. These Thousand Sons warriors hesitated for a moment upon seeing the wolves. After all, they were Astartes brothers, both sons of the Emperor. But when the wolves attacked the Thousand Sons mercilessly, these thoughts were instantly thrown aside. Now, right and wrong no longer mattered. Bolters clashed, blades struck. From then on, there was no brotherhood between the Thousand Sons and the wolves, only war.
The Thousand Sons might have been far fewer in number than the Space Wolves, but the psychic power they wielded allowed one to fight 100. The psychic warriors of the Legion unleashed wave after wave of psychic attacks against the charging Wolfpack. The wolves were tossed and twisted like light, fragile objects. Their bodies were torn to pieces by the Thousand Sons from a distance. Lightning and fire, manifest from psychic energy, burned targets into unrecognizable lumps of charcoal. The 6th Legion's assault troops were being cut down in swaths. Simultaneously, the Thousand Sons deployed their last remaining armored firepower to join the fray. Empowered by psychic energy, every street and corner of Tizca became a hellish battlefield. For a short time, the defenders held back the first wave of the Wolfpack's attack. Flesh was scorched by psychic fire, armor pierced by shells. For every step forward, the attackers paid a heavy price.
Just then, the Talons of the Emperor, the Custodian Guard, and the Sisters of Silence appeared on the battlefield to support the wolves' offensive. The Sisters of Silence were a specialized anti-psyker force composed entirely of blanks, pariahs. Blanks are a rare human mutation. Normally, most sentient beings have some connection to the warp. This connection is also referred to as a soul. Psykers have a particularly strong connection to the warp, so their soul's projection in the warp shines as bright as a star in the night. A blank, however, is a special mutant with absolutely no connection to the warp. They have no soul in the warp, and their projection is like a black hole. When they are around Psykers, they weaken or even sever those individuals' connection to the warp. When the Sisters of Silence assisted the Space Wolves in attacking the Thousand Sons' defensive lines, the power of these psychic sorcerers was restricted. Coupled with the support of the powerful Custodian Guard, the 15th Legion was overwhelmed. The Thousand Sons began to retreat, but even so, they successfully held back the invaders for several days. By this time, the 15th Legion had suffered heavy casualties, with only a little over 1,000 warriors surviving. As the Space Wolves' 13th Great Company spearheaded the assault on the Thousand Sons' final stronghold, the Pyramid of Photep, the Primarch of the 15th Legion, Magnus the Red, finally answered his son's pleas. He would save this legion. The Primarch had remained shut away since the wolves arrived on Prospero, watching his sons being slaughtered and his home destroyed. He understood all along that both the attackers and defenders on Prospero were pawns of chaos being played in the palm of a hand. The evil gods wanted the Thousand Sons and the wolves to slaughter each other. Chaos had been whispering in his ear. Magnus had intended to pay for his mistakes and accept punishment, but in the end he chose to save his sons, thereby accepting the deal offered by the warp. The 15th Legion had truly become traitors to the Imperium. The Primarch of the Thousand Sons descended onto the battlefield shrouded in light and fire. His psychic power was so immense that when he looked at the Wolfpack with his single eye, even the bravest wolves were instantly driven mad and died on the spot. Now only one figure stood tall, glaring back at Magnus, the Primarch of the 6th Legion, the Wolf King, Leman Russ.
Magnus ordered his remaining sons to retreat into the pyramid. He would hold the line for his legion alone. The Crimson King used his psychic spells to block the advance of the Wolfpack. Then he looked at his brother. The two giants, two Primarchs, two legion leaders charged at each other, beginning an earth-shattering duel. Leman Russ's sword and axe clashed against Magnus's psychic sorcery. While the Primarchs fought to the death, wave after wave of wolves tried to storm the pyramid again. Just as the Thousand Sons prepared for their final stand, they suddenly heard a deafening roar of pain from Magnus. When the Sorcerer King knocked the Wolf Lord of Fenris to the ground with a heavy psychic blow, the Wolf King, using his blade, struck across Magnus's remaining eye. The 15th Legion Primarch immediately and painfully drew upon his psychic power to heal the eye wound. At that moment, the fallen Leman Russ suddenly leapt up. Ignoring his own injuries, he resolutely tackled his brother. The Wolf King used his brute strength to subdue the wounded red giant, lifted him over his head, and slammed him down, breaking Magnus's spine across his knee. Instantly, the Genefather's heart-wrenching pain pierced the heart of every Thousand Son. They knew their Primarch had been defeated. Magnus had long foreseen that he would die in this duel, and that the Thousand Sons Legion would vanish in the flames of Prospero. This was their fate. But now he had made a deal with the god in the warp who governed fate, Tzinch. As the leader of the Wolfpack raised his blade to execute his paralyzed brother, the red giant cast one final fate-altering psychic spell. By sacrificing his physical body and shattering his soul, he distributed his power to all surviving sons, allowing them to conduct a massive spatial teleportation. The destination was a daemon world within the Eye of Carer, the intersection of the warp and real space. Magnus the Sorcerer's once complete soul shattered into shards. Just before his body dissipated, the former Lord of Prospero spoke his last words to the Wolf King standing before him. The 6th Legion had won another victory. The once beautiful paradise world of Prospero had been turned into ruins by the ferocious wolves of Fenris. This was exactly what Warmaster Horus wanted. Without lifting a finger, the Imperium itself had removed the one legion he feared most.
Later, when the heresy erupted, Imperial forces facing the power of chaos would lack the effective counterfire of the Thousand Sons' psychic warriors. Previously, the Warmaster had spoken one by one with the Primarch brothers closest to him, corrupting them using the tone of a friend. Through his eloquence, talent, and the whispers of the warp, Angron, Primarch of the 12th Legion World Eaters, Mortarion, Primarch of the 14th Legion Death Guard, and Fulgrim, Primarch of the 3rd Legion Emperor's Children and Horus's best friend, all led their troops to join Horus's rebellion. At the same time, using his authority as Warmaster, Horus sent the most loyal and incorruptible brothers, such as Lion L. Johnson of the 1st Legion Dark Angels, Sanguinius of the 9th Legion Blood Angels, and Robute Gilliman of the 13th Legion Ultramarines, along with their troops to fight in remote sectors far from Terra and Horus's location. Other legions, such as the Alpha Legion, Raven Guard, Salamanders, Iron Hands, Night Lords, and White Scars, were executing missions across the galaxy. The Imperial Fists had been recalled to the Sol System by the Emperor himself to coordinate the defense of Terra. Now, before dealing with these remaining legions and declaring total war on the Imperium, the Warmaster needed to do one more thing: eliminate the uncontrollable elements within his own and his allies' forces. For this purpose, in the Isstvan system, far from Terra, Horus and his 3 ally legions gathered. On the 3rd planet of Isstvan, they would dispose of the loyalists within their legions who still superstitiously believed in the Emperor. For the rise of the Warmaster, a terrible betrayal was about to be put into action.